Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. It's the spring update and you know what that means. It means KingsIsle's decided it's time to grace us with a little more content. Just a little crumb of content. Funny enough, I was too lazy to actually sign on to the game to do the spring update because today's video is something that doesn't involve the game. It is a spreadsheet that I made as I do because recently, you may or may not have seen, they decided to release something called the Atavistic gear in Celestia. Now what this is they released a new level 60 gear set that is comparable and even slightly better than Waterworks in some ways. And today, I wanted to go over that gear set. I made a nice visual for everyone so they can see the gear and really answer the question, is it worth farming? Because if you didn't know, they've done this a few times now. They released the Celestia gear, the level 50 gear, and they also released some Chrysalis gear, I believe. Now, the thing with these gear sets is you need to be around that level to farm them. I believe how it works is the Dragonspire one, as soon as you get the Celestia badge for beating Celestia, you can no longer get the drops. Now, they've circumvented this by adding something called the Scales of Destiny, where if you interact with it, it'll scale down your level and you'll be around that level to farm the gear. So, without further ado, enough rambling, let's get into it. Starting off with, where do you get this gear? Now, you can see here, I listed the drops right here. You can get hats, robes, and boots from Mithraea in the Trial of Spheres. That is the final boss, the Sun Lady, at the very end before you leave the world. Wands and decks are from Big Salgio in the Chancel, also known as the Solarium, which is the second to last dungeon in Celestia. There's Athames from Praetor Mako in the Crustacean Empire, who's one of the last bosses in Crustacean Empire. Amulets from Akalos in Crustacean Empire. Now this actually, funny enough, this boss is a side quest, which you need to do by getting the side quest Book Learning from Thurston Plunkett, who is just like right when you walk into Crustacean Empire, he's there. And finally, we have rings, which are from Queen Calypso in the Crustacean Empire. Now, I will say overall, just glancing at these, the hats, robes, and boots, the wands and decks, are gonna suck the most because Athames, amulets, and rings are all a boss that is just a single chamber, like a single room, and then you fight the boss. It's pretty easy versus the other ones where you have to do a full dungeon to go through, which can be a bit annoying, especially the Trial of Spheres, which even with like a max level carrying you through is still probably gonna take around 15 to 20 minutes to do. So I feel like it's very important before deciding whether or not to go for this gear, is it worth actually going through that dungeon? Like, you need to decide, am I gonna want to farm this 15 to 20-minute dungeon over and over again to get this gear? Now, I wrote the conclusion here, which I'm going to say now, but we're going to go over it again at the end once I've showed all the gear off. Basically, what I've found from looking at this is that the boots, wand, and ring on every school are pretty much the best you can get at level 60. Especially the boots are a definite upgrade from Waterworks, and I'm not sure, I can't recall any other level 60 dropped boots. There is obviously Crown Shop pack boots, but I'm not counting those because if it was Crown Shop, I'm sure most of this gear probably isn't even the best gear in the game still. I don't really count Crown Shop for these. The Waterworks robes are better than the new robes, so I would say that the robes are not really worth wearing, and the Zigzag are way better. Like, it's not even a comparison for most of them, the Zigzag to the Atavistic robes. The hats you can pick and choose. They have very similar stats. You can take a look at them, see which one you want to go with. Athames are pretty mediocre on Fire and Ice. For some reason, Fire and Ice's Athames have the lowest like damage and stats out of all of them. The Lexicon Blade for those two is probably better, which is from the Tower of the Elephant, but you can make do with this or even the Blade of Battle from Wintertusk, like the Ruby Blade of Battle, whatever. That's the fire one off the top of my head. You can get those from the Bazaar. It's what everyone's been using, the level 56 Athames, for a long time. And then I'd say that the amulets are good, but probably not worth farming for, specifically just because Jewel of the Faint is so good with that extra Faint stacking that I don't know if this amulet is really worth getting. And that's the overall conclusion of the gear. I've been rambling for 5 minutes. Let's actually look at it. So we're going to start with fire. I'd just like to say, by the way, I've linked the spreadsheet in the description and maybe even pinned the comment. It's going to be in the top of the description below. So go click on it. You can look at all of this, find all the gear, look at it more in depth than what I'm going to go over here. This is the main comparison right here of the hat, robe, and boots. The reason why I didn't include the amulets, rings, and Athames in with it or the Zigzag gear is because both of those are kind of situational and you only pick and choose one. Like, no one uses the full Zigzag gear, but a lot of people do use the full Waterworks gear. So I figured I would use the full comparison combination of stats. For example, for Fire, Fire's Waterworks has 700 HP, 19 accuracy, no power pip, 29 resist, 114 crit, 40 block, 48 damage, 15% incoming healing, gives no cards, whereas the Atavistic gives 651 HP, 7% accuracy, 9% power pip, 16% resist, 153 crit. I accidentally pressed a key there, so the block isn't showing up, but I believe it's about 125 from what I remember adding up. 53% damage, 0% incoming healing, 11 pierce, and 3 cards. Specifically, the boots give a blade, which is very important. Now, I'm not going to go over the stats for all of these because obviously that'll just be a lot of me talking and your eyes will probably glaze over and you'll be like all bored and stuff. The overall gist of this gear, from what I'm seeing and kind of for most of them, some of them it's a bit of an outlier, but on average, the HP is lower, the accuracy is lower, but it gives power pip, which a lot don't. Specifically, Life, Death, and Balance Waterworks give power pip. All of these give power pip for every school, whereas Fire, Ice, Storm, and Myths Waterworks give accuracy, and this gives less accuracy. So take that as you will. This gear gives less resist, more crit, more block. I would say on average, the damage is better, but for some of them, it is worse. This gear gives Pierce, which is good, and then obviously the item cards. Now, I also included the wand down here for you to look at, but as you can see, for Fire especially, I believe for Ice, the damage is lower than... No, it's the same as Skyrim Hasta. For all of them, the damage is the same or better as the Skyrim Hasta, but it has Pierce, crit, and block added to it. So obviously this wand is just a straight up upgrade for all of them. So I'd recommend getting the wand at the very least. Now, looking at the actual gear itself, because I feel like it's important to look at the stats and some of them like specifically stand out. So for example, the boots, you can see give the most amount of damage right here. So like on this gear, the hat, robe, and boots, the boots give the most damage. Compare that to the Waterworks where the boots give the least amount of damage. It's actually quite good to use these boots with the Waterworks gear for a few of them. So for example, for Fires, the Atavistic boots give 6 more damage. They only give 3 less resist, so not that much loss there. They give more block, more health, more power pip. They give Pierce, they give more crit. Overall, the boots are just a flat upgrade, which is why I would say on literally all of them, from what I looked at, the boots are just flat out better. Like there's no reason to not get the boots on every school. On some of them, the boots are like such an upgrade that it's ridiculous. Like the Myths give 5 extra damage. The Storms boots give less damage. That's interesting. So all of them except Storm, it might be actually good to get the boots, because apparently Storm likes to be quirky and special, because we all know the Wolf Storm blades of the world need to be unique and special. Looking at the other gear though, I would say that the robe on every school is kind of worse. It trades that damage for a little bit of Pierce, which I think is good, but is it really worth it? Not really. When you're losing out on a little bit of damage, a decent amount of resist, like health, and for certain schools you're missing out on power pip, I would say that the robes just aren't good. And then if you take a look over here, oops, I accidentally zoomed out, that's not what I wanted. If you take a look over here to the zigzag robe, the robe is even bigger of a difference. Like it's like a 5 damage fall off, plus the zigzag gives power pip and accuracy, plus that decent resist. It's just not really worth it. Now the hats, on the other hand, as you can see, looking at all of them, I'll move the zigzag over here for now so you can see it better. Realistically, the Atavistic has the best damage, but it has like significantly worse resist, a little bit of Pierce added to it. It's like realistically, you could pick or choose any of these hats and it wouldn't really matter. For some schools, the Atavistic is like way better, like decent amounts, and then some it's not at all. So like Storm, I will say, looking at Storms definitely got shafted the most here, because I don't think there's a reason to farm for almost any of the Atavistic gear on Storm, because the damage is just flat out worse on all of them. Now let's move into the Athames, Amulets, and Rings section of this. As you can see, the rings are actually very, very good. So for most of them it gives 7, for Storm it gives 9, Life 8, Myth 8, Death 9, balance 8. The rings are very good because the rings of battle, if I remember correctly, which most people use, or the Aureate band, I think is the other one, those give around 5 damage, I would say, on average. So the average being like an 8 or a 9 is actually way better, I would say, for a lot of these, especially since you can farm the rings very easily. The Athame, on the other hand, you can see that for some reason fire and ices only give 5, which isn't very good, but storms gives 10, lives gives 8, myths gives 7, deaths gives 9, and balances gives 8. Realistically, I would say that the Athame's worth farming on most schools, just maybe not fire and ice. Up to you. And then finally we have the amulet, which again, it gives resist, it gives health, which is good. It also gives a triangle slot, which is pretty good as well, but it doesn't give that extra feint that the Jewel of the Feint would. So I don't really know if you can justify wearing this over that. It's up to you. I personally would recommend Jewel of the Feint, but if you want to go for that extra stats, you definitely can. Finally, to wrap up this gear, what else does this gear that other gear sets don't have, like Waterworks doesn't have? They have pins and they have quite useful jewel slots. So you can see here the Athame, amulet, and ring have quite a bit of jewel slots, like it's comparable to the max level gear of jewel slots. And this gear obviously also have pins, which are dropped by these bosses as well. This gear has the advantage, if you want to dual school, you can, and you can very easily probably socket some pierce jewels onto these and up your pierce quite a bit. So I will say that these stats on the Athame, amulet, and ring are a bit deceptive because they can go even higher than what they currently are, especially in the power pip section and potentially even accuracy with these triangle slots. So overall, the conclusion and what to draw from this video. Would I recommend farming this set of gear? I will say definitely in the wand section and the ring section. It is very good to farm this gear, and it will very much last you up until level 100 very easily. And again, it's not very hard to farm for a lot of this gear. I don't know exactly the drop rates in comparison to other gear because I haven't farmed it myself, but I imagine that the gear isn't the most rare in the world. Like, it's not impossible to get, and these solo bosses where they're by themselves, very easily you can just blitz through it. Again, I would say Zigzag and Waterworks robes are better. If you don't want to farm for Waterworks or Zigzag, you could farm for this robe, but considering that the robe is dropped by Mithraea in the Trial of Spheres, which is probably the hardest boss to farm out of all of these, I don't know if it's worth actually farming that, and that's again why I would say the hat is in comparison. Obviously, the boots are also dropped by Mithraea, so that is a problem. But I would say that if you're farming for the boots and you end up with the hat and the robe, it's just a happy accident, you know? Athame and ring definitely are good for most schools. Amulets, probably not worth farming for. So that's it for today. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Are you going to farm for this gear? Do you think it's worth it? Is this cool? I think it does kind of make me want to make a new wizard or use a wizard around level 60 and go through the worlds again, because honestly I think that this gear seems very fun, especially like the extra blade and with the stats. I could see myself having fun with this gear. So that's it for today. Make sure to drop a like, hit the sub button, hit the join button if you want to support me. If not, that's fine as well. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.